Come closer to the fire. Some places never stop keeping time, even after the clock is gone. West of Boise, there's a shallow bend of valley where the old line used to run. Ties sinking back to dirt, rails lifted for scrap, mileposts leaning like tired foremen. In 1963, a night freight rolled out and did not arrive. No wreckage, no smoke, only a silence the county learned to live with. Most years, around the same week in April, the valley remembers. Headlights move where no headlights belong. A low horn combs the dark like a hand over old grain. People shrug or swear it off. The land has its own ledger. Tonight is the long account of a train that never stopped and of the patient ways a place rehearses an unfinished arrival.
The timetable listed train 714 as ordinary work. 2 diesels coupled nose to tail, 12 cars of farm hardware and sacks of seed, 1 mail coach lashed behind like a good habit. Departure 11, 47 p.m. Stop for water if needed near Caldwell. Arrival 12:36 a.m. The run had the feel of muscle memory. Westbound loads in the afternoon, eastbound empties at night. The way irrigation follows melt and invoices follow harvest. On a mild April night, the dispatch notes recorded departure as expected. The telegraph in the depot clicked its brief farewell. A ranch dog lifted its head at the sound and let the valley resume breathing. Somewhere between mileposts 39 and 41, the radio went obediently quiet. Not with panic, but with the same tidiness a conductor uses to end a routine call. Section crews searched with lanterns and jeeps and borrowed planes at dawn. There was nothing to photograph, nothing to inventory. Fence wire lay torn for a mile, as if some great thing had brushed a sleeve across it without malice. Gravel bore the memory of weight, and then changed its mind. The trestle over Dry Creek was intact. The newspaper printed what a newspaper prints when it runs out of verbs. Missing, presumed, ongoing. In the superintendent's file, a note with a practical tone instructed clerks to keep the paperwork aligned while the lawyers decided which name would explain it least expensively. The line shrank by autumn. Mail shifted to road. Freight learned shortcuts. The depot began to close rooms. It could no longer justify heating. The rails were lifted in sections over the next decade. The right-of-way slept. It is a kind sleep, the kind that keeps one eye open. The first reliable report came from someone who distrusted stories. Ruth Anders calibrated barometers and wrote storm scripts for radio so commuters could decide when to leave early. Instruments were her allegiances. One September night, she set up a portable seismograph near the foothills to check whether micro-tremors would interfere with the new antenna. The needle ticked its fine language along the baseline. At 11:46, it began to jump in 10-second pulses. Steady intervals, too regular for wind, not near enough to thunder. She stepped out into air that felt padded, the way a snow day muffles without snow. Along the curve where the line had once been, a glow gathered. 2 pale discs level with the horizon, not the pitch of oncoming trucks, too high for farm lights, moving at an unembarrassed pace. There was no diesel throb, only a pressure against the skin as if something large rearranged molecules politely. The sage bent once and held that posture. The light slid through the bend, softened, and left the valley blank again. Later, the tape refused to admit anything more dramatic than a series of pulses, 10 seconds apart, ending at 11:47. She logged it as a ground anomaly and placed the folder where careful people put events that will not defend themselves on paper. Still, a pattern joined her. The next April, and the one after, the needle did its small dance near midnight if the night ran dry, and the wind held off. The station manager grew used to Ruth's voice late in spring evenings, precise and calm, noting pressure drops that had no storm to wear. Long before hikers found the right-of-way scenic, a foreman named Ellison drove it in a county truck out of habit, then in his own pickup after the county forgot the route. He said the line did not like being ignored. On a Friday in the late 1970s, he found twin impressions pressed into grass where ballast used to lie. Clean, parallel, spaced like steel, running straight toward the old trestle. The Dry Creek decking had fallen away. There was nothing to carry even a cat across. Yet the marks continued beyond the gap for a few strides of air before fading, like a sentence that realizes it has outrun punctuation. He hammered a spike into dirt where the rails would have rejoined, a small ceremony for his own benefit, then went home without stopping at the tavern. After that, neighbors noticed his porch light burning at 11:45 most Fridays. He did not say why. Some rituals do not ask for an audience. The spike rusted down over the years until a boy on a bicycle kicked it loose and took it home, thinking it lucky. The trestle rot sank to the logic of water. Ellison's truck began to appear in town less often, then not at all. But the nicks he'd left in fence posts where he parked remained, and every April a thin, bright scrape renewed itself along one of them, as if a very heavy thing had brushed by at a courtesy distance. In the county museum, a retired clerk named Helen Parker sorted timetables and stapled small histories to bigger ones. She found that the ledger for 1963 never showed a canceled run. The column that should have carried a neat diagonal line closing the route carried instead the last exact departure and a blank where arrivals usually scolded the future into alignment. Railroads do not like blanks. She wrote to the successor company and received a form letter that said, "Absorption into alternate routing," a phrase that means responsibility has been routed into the hallway between departments. Helen pinned the letter above her desk and began leaving a thermos on the old depot bench each April. Coffee, black, lid unscrewed to a polite degree, as if a crew might pass and accept a small kindness nobody needed to be thanked for. The thermos was always lighter in the morning. She told no one. She had lost enough people to know what secrecy preserves. When school groups toured the museum, she let the children hammer a dull spike into a piece of tie and listen for the note wood makes when it accepts work. On years when the river ran high, the echo came back stronger than it should have, as if the ground still expected weight. Bureaucracy committed its own folklore. A form in an archive in Pocatello continued to list 714 as active in a forgotten field. A payroll ledger from the dispatcher's desk carried a penciled note, "Recalculate horn oil allotment," that never learned it was not needed. Paper learns the habits of the hands that touch it. Some hands refuse to let go. The sheriff's logs recorded the valley's rehearsal at a human scale. Now and then, a caller complained that windows shivered once near midnight, the way they do when a truck passes fast, though no truck climbed the county road at that hour. Dogs warned the air and then apologized. A deputy parked by the crossing one April night and wrote, in the careful script of people who have to read themselves on the stand, that the room inside his cruiser grew grainy at 11:47. The radio found static it did not usually want. The dash clock dimmed and then behaved. The headlights hummed, the way filaments do moments before failure, and then regained pride. In the morning, the asphalt wore faint, parallel scuffs where none of the county's vehicles had reason to drive. Teenagers tested the legend the way teenagers test doors. They camped where the embankment is lowest and returned home with bravado. Their stories were untrustworthy in tone, but remarkably consistent in detail. The light never blasted, it drifted. The horn did not shout, it moaned from a distance that could not be found with feet. The ground did not shake like disaster. It throbbed, as if asking the body to remember something heavy. They took photographs that showed nothing a parent would value and kept them anyway. Wind farms began to chew the ridges north of the valley. The red aviation lights pulsed at a responsible pace and taught the night a new rhythm. Still, each April, the older rhythm showed up between pulses and minded its own schedule. 4 decades after her first anomaly, Ruth came back with newer equipment and less appetite for certainty. Her gait had shortened. She set the tripod slower. She placed one camera toward the curve and another toward herself, an insurance against the convenient lies single lenses tell. A pressure sensor settled on the gravel where the rails used to cling. A small recorder took a breath of the night and waited. At 11:41, the insects thinned until the silence had its own texture. A cold gathered along the ground as if water walked uphill. The pressure needle sagged 2 millibars. A hum arrived from nowhere, not a pitch so much as the idea of one. The cameras saw it before she admitted it. Light broadening along the old alignment, 2 discs where lamps should be, level as a carpenter's bubble, moving at the pace of something confident. The recorder caught a low metallic swell that did not bloom into engine but held to a courteous volume, as if the sound traveled through earth and came up underfoot. For 8 seconds, the timestamp on the forward camera did not advance. On the rear camera, the second hand continued calmly across Ruth's wristwatch. The valley had picked a clock. She stood without moving, and the light slid through her like memory slides through a mind that has practiced this passage. The horn, if horn is the word when there is nothing to carry it, laid down one long bar of sound and let the night keep the tale. The pressure rose again. The insects remembered their jobs, and the grass took back the shape of grass. On review the next day, the data behaved like polite absence. The lens flares could be argued with. The 8 silent seconds could be blamed on heat or battery. The hum underfoot refused argument. It stayed on the file like a signature you cannot quite read, but recognize anyway. Her report did not overreach. She wrote that a periodic event with acoustic and barometric features recurred at the same hour and week across multiple years. She wrote that the source was not meteorological, vehicular, or aircraft. She allowed a sentence that engineers do not like writing. The valley appears to be replaying an impulse. The right-of-way is a trail now. Cyclists ride it in afternoons. Runners look east and measure their health by how quickly the hills approach. At night, the county keeps the path unlit, and the wind comes down with the same unpersuadable mind it used when there were rails to lean on. If you stand by the old signal post, the iron still weathering slower than everything else, you will feel, beneath your shoes, a pulse. 10 seconds apart. 10 again. 10. The body begins to expect the next one in the way the chest expects its next breath. It is not dramatic. It is simply regular. Locals do not gather in costume or sell t-shirts. They do what places do when they have made peace with a fact. Porch lights burn a little longer the week the anomaly comes round. The museum keeps a box where school children leave paper trains drawn in crayon, all of them pointed toward a station door that no longer opens. Folks driving home late sometimes see light braided with low fog over the alfalfa and do not mention it at breakfast because the day deserves not to be asked for proof. Every once in a while, the county crews repaint the reflective crossbuck at the road, even though nothing crosses, because paint is cheap and warnings are cheaper than sorrow. I walked that bend last autumn when the fields had gone the color of straw and the river carried only enough music to keep stones from forgetting. A frost smell rode the ditch grass. The moon hung low and reasonable. At 11:47, the night's floor tilted an idea thicker. I did not turn toward the bend first. I looked into the black window of a farmhouse and felt a room listening along with me. The light came, an improvement on darkness rather than a violation of it, and traveled exactly where the diagram in a depot book would have put it. I stood with the valley and let it move through. No one arrived because arrival is a word for schedules, and this is a matter of habit. The habit, however, is generous. It does not frighten. It gathers, proceeds, and leaves the air cleaner than it found it, the way a vow leaves a space both emptier and more honest once it is spoken.
Trains obey rails. Memory obeys itself. Out near Boise, the earth remembers the weight that trusted it and repays the favor by keeping the hour. If you ever find yourself there in April with the cold coming up through your shoes, don't wait for an explanation. Let the light pass, let the horn thread the night, and carry that steady interval home like a quiet metronome. Some journeys keep moving not to arrive, but to remind the dark it is being watched. The fire knows this. So does the valley. So now do you.